Hi girls, so we need to find out where our case study is first of all. So the place that we've looking at right now is obviously school. You can even see the mile track on the field. And we're going to fly down and look at where our example of flood management is. So what I have to search for is a place called Boscastle. That's Boscastle. That's our name of our case study, and it's a small village, and we're flying down all the way to southwest England. We're now in a county called Cornwall, and as you can see, Boscastle is a very small town, a small village, in between three different rivers, the main river being the River Valency. In fact, this meeting point between rivers is what they call a confluence. So Boscastle is at risk of flooding because of this confluence. You can also see the shape of the hills. So Boscastle is actually where there's some very steep-sided valleys. When it rains, it easily floods in the area. Another reason why it needs flood defences. So if we just zoom out, we can see where we are in the UK. Just turn it back to north. And Boscastle is all the way down there in Cornwall in the southwest of England. So fill in the first part of your sheet. A reason Boscastle needed defences, flood defences, is because it's been flooded before. We can see here on BBC News in August 2014 that they called it Boscastle, the village that washed onto the map. So as we can see, we've got some people being rescued in this picture from houses. So there were some terrible floods in 2004 where 100 people had to be safely taken away by helicopters because lots and lots of rain had fallen in a short time. The flooding came so quickly that there was some damage done to many of the houses. If we scroll down, we can see the houses being destroyed and bridges. So they've had to rebuild, like you can see in this picture, changing from damage like this during the floods to nice, safer areas. So because of previous flooding, Boscastle is somewhere that needs protection. So now we need to fill in the part about what the actual strategies were. So we've got a diagram here showing Boscastle, simple diagram of Boscastle, and some of the major strategies they did. There were 5 major points that you're going to have to get down. So first of all is they spent £10 million. So £10 million is a huge economic cost which comes all from our taxes, because it was done by this company called the Environment Agency. And well, they're not a company really, they're part of the government. So all of that money comes from our taxes. So there was £10 million spent on different strategies. So one of the things they did is they've actually widened and deepened the river. If the river is now wider and deeper, it can fit more water in it. And if it can fit more water in it and let it pass through and get away from that town, it's unlikely to flood. They also removed any of the low bridges and replaced them with much bigger, wider bridges, like you can see at the top of the diagram. That's so any water that's flooding through it can now fit through, and it won't get blocked with trees, because that was one of the major issues before and made it flood even worse. One of the next things they've done is they've raised the car parks. So there's lots of car parks in the town because it's very popular with tourists, and locals also need places to park. So they've made them even higher, so they're less likely to flood. They've also used what's called a permeable surface. And a permeable surface means that when it rains, any of the water will soak into the ground, because what happened before was when it rained, the water went straight into the river. So the car park using a permeable surface is an important one. And the final thing that they did was something called tree management, which includes afforestation. These are key things you need to know about. So because a lot of the trees blocked the river before, they had to manage it by removing all the dead ones. That let all the water get through and would stop it flooding. Also, people who owned the land around there, so the farmers, were encouraged to plant a lot of trees. and that meant that when it rains, any water can get caught in the leaves or soaked up by the trees themselves. So there were 5 major strategies. It cost £10 million. They made the river wider and deeper. They changed all of the bridges. They made the car park even higher, and they removed the dead trees and planted new ones. So you might want to pause me for a second, but it will come back up at the end. So we have to look at the 3 different issues, like always in geography. So first of all, the social issues, which are the problems that people had afterwards. So here we can see on the picture, we've got the rebuilding of the city, of the town even, what it looked like before, what it looked like afterwards. So the rebuilding projects and construction of the flood defences actually took several years. It took about 6 years in total. And that meant that people's lives were disrupted for a long time. So that was really difficult for them to go about their day-to-day work. The flood defences actually wouldn't protect a flood the same size as the one in 2004, so it might protect them from smaller floods, but if they have one like they did before, they'll still have a lot of damage done to the village. And the new bridge is not actually that popular with local people. So here you can see the old bridge, what it looked like, but local people aren't keen on the new one, which looks like this. Personally, I like it. You might like it too. It's quite modern. But for a place that relies on tourism, it might not be the kind of bridge that people like to take photos outside of. So a few different social issues there. And now we'll look at the economic issues. There are 3 main economic issues, so anything to do with the cost, the money involved in this flooding, in the management of the flooding. So the rebuilding of the projects cost about £10 million, as I said. So that was a huge cost for taxpayers, for local people, a lot of issues there. Tourists were still reluctant to come back even after this flood defences because they might be worried that it could flood again, or maybe it's not going to look very nice, so you can see it in the picture there. And although it might be safer from flooding now, many of the businesses that were there before, especially those that got destroyed, like this place in the picture, had to close forever. They couldn't take the hit and their buildings were too badly damaged. So we've got the huge cost of £10 million, the fact that tourists might not come back, and that many businesses have closed. Remember, you can catch up on this at the end. And finally, girls, we're going to look at the environmental issues, so anything to do with the nature or the environment around Boscastle, and you can see that here in the picture, quite a nice green environment with the river there. So, first of all, the environment wasn't actually that badly affected by these flood defences. In fact, biodiversity has improved, as have the river habitats. So biodiversity is the amount of different plants and animals in an area, so that's got better. The vegetation's now being managed, so there's always going to be trees there, which is a good thing. The only real issue was that some pollution was given off in the construction of the defences. So from the traffic, it could be air pollution, or from the manufacturing as well, perhaps there was water pollution and air pollution given off. But not many environmental issues, so just the biodiversity has improved, and some pollution in the air may have been given off. So you should have a nice little summary of Boscastle now, and I'll give you that information just to make sure you've got the key points in a second, and you're going to use it to do one of your least favourite things, exam practice. So you're going to practice an exam question based on that information from Boscastle. So it's really important that you read through that page in the book, because it will tell you exactly what you need to do for the question. It's slightly different because it's talking about a photo that you can see in the top left here of the River Ouse in York, not the River Valency in Boscastle. However, you can talk about different strategies that you can see in here. So, what you need to do is talk about the costs and benefits, positives and negatives of different kinds of strategies. Read through the page, follow the instructions, and try your best. Thanks for listening, girls. Have a great week.